It is November 2nd, 2023, and I am outside of Cambridge in the United Kingdom. The theme I wanted to explore in this recording is the question, what is God? So I'm going to keep it simple with the theme today. Of course, that is a joke, but I did want to allow this question to be an access point to, in a sense, a deconstructing that question as a way to point us to a relational, a dialogic, a participatory engagement with that question, rather than an attempt to categorize or reduce that question into propositional forms of knowing. So a propositional form of knowing is simply like a proposition or a statement like God is X. And then it's fill in the blank with whatever quality or attribution or object of characterization that is completing that statement. So we can see with this question right away that when we ask, what is God? If we are to look at that question grammatically or semantically, we're already led to respond to it if we're exploring this question from a place of logic or rational knowing, that we're going to end up with some form of response, which is God is blank. So rather than completing that sentence, God is blank, let's put an X there. God is X, and that X being the mathematical symbol of X, which symbolically is representing a variable, we could say, in which there is no definitive way to assign that variable to any one form or object. So we're already opening up that question or statement. What is God? God is blank. Now we're turning it into God is X, with X symbolizing a variable or a mystery. There's an unknown quality to it. So perhaps we can see that X in two ways. One, we can point to the multiplicity of what that X can represent, many different things. So perhaps we can see this, God is X, as representing the multiplicity of manifestation in God's being. God is God expressing itself through the multiplicity of forms of being. Each of those forms of being, in some ways, expressing an aspect of God's essence. Another way we can see this statement or proposition, God is X, is to see this X not as standing for any particular or multiplicity of forms, but X symbolizing the very mystery itself. So in this sense, God is unknown or is transcendent. In a book I'm reading on Meister Eckhart, in the introduction, an argument is made that in the contemporary West, we fall into two potential misunderstandings of God. The first of those understandings is to say that God doesn't exist. In a sense, if we come back to that propositional statement, God is X, we are filling that blank in with a particular definitive statement as to God not existing. So again, we're falling into a trap of propositionality, if that is a word. There's a reductiveness, there's a fixedness, there's a limitedness to how we're even approaching the question itself. Another trap that we fall into is identifying God as a particular being. So the, let's say, simple way to characterize and caricaturize that is the way we might, in the Western tradition, see God as being an elderly white man in some kind of heavenly domain with a beard, pronouncing judgment. So this is another form of trap or error, is to characterize God as a particular being. One reason why the Muslim tradition, but this has also been a theme throughout Abrahamic traditions in general, but one particular feature of the Muslim tradition is to really be cautionary about any imagistic representation of God, precisely for this reason, because then we are falling into the trap of imaging God in a limited form. So what is it to ask this question, what is God? And not to land in a place of the propositional statement, there is no God, and not to land in a place of the propositional statement, God is this, as in some image or limited conception of a divine being. Where does that leave us? And that's what we're invited to step into. The person pointing out these two limitations is, can we step into a space in which we are holding, it is not this limited point of view, and it is not this limited point of view. We are pressed into, called into, pushed into our own beingness of holding the question in an open way. So now we are moving from the limitations of logic and fixed identification into a participatory space of inquiry and even knowing. And this is what the medieval Persian philosopher and mystic Suhrawardi would have said was knowing by presence, which he contrasted to knowing through description. These other sentence completion forms. Propositional forms are forms of knowing by description, ultimately, he would say. And he would also describe all of conventional empirical science as falling into that category of knowing by description. So what is this knowing by presence? Well, I'm going to drop us into a dialogue or a prayer that Ibn Arabi is having with the divine, with God, about that very question and exploration, and see if you can feel how in his prayer he is moving us into a participatory or a knowing by presence orientation to this question. I was reading this prayer this morning, and the reason I wanted to share it was because it also feels very resonant and coherent with the space that is opened up for me in the practice of ally work. Even as we are orienting to the ally, we don't want to be limited to seeing the ally in a propositional form, to getting caught in trap of like, the ally, what is the ally? Is it this or is it that? We want to move into a participatory space with the ally. And ultimately, I would say the benefit of this framework of ally practice and the practice itself is it's kind of like a distilled, personalized way to orient to the divine that can be accessible to people from different spiritual and cultural contexts, or even lack of religious contexts. There's something about ally work that is tapping us into the deeper participatory forms of knowing that I'll share Ibn Arabi's perspective on in just a moment. But ally work is, you could say, I wouldn't say a secular, but let's say a, what is the word I'm looking for here? Let's, for the sake of simplicity, say an interspiritual or an intercontemplative form. Okay, so let's listen here, keeping in mind Ibn Arabi is coming from a particular cultural and religious context, and seeing if you can find the universal in this or the way you relate to it. So feel in particular the highly relational orientation to the divine here. And feel also what is possible, what he sees as possible through this highly focused, highly relational engagement with this X, with this divine as X, open, variable, and transcendent. So Ibn Arabi says in one part of this prayer, the Thursday morning prayer, "O God, distinguish my secret heart with the secrets of your oneness. Sanctify my spirit with the sanctified revelations of your qualities. Purify my heart with the pure knowledges of your divinity. O God, instruct my intellect in the sciences of your private knowledge, and perfume my soul with the virtues of your lordship. Assure my senses by extending illuminating rays from the presences of your radiant light. Liberate the quintessential gemstones of my corporeality from the constraints of gross nature, from the condensity of sense perception, and from the confinement of place and phenomenal world. Oh God, transport me from the descending steps of my created being and nature to the ascending flight of your truth and essential reality. You are my friend and master. In you I die, and from you I take life. It is you alone whom we adore, and it is you alone we ask for aid. And what do you feel in resonating with that? What I feel is we very much move from the starting point of this question, what is God, into this very highly relational, participatory engagement that like resonates through the felt sense, through the body, that opens up our conceptions and feeling of who we are to much more complex and meaningful dimensions. There's a strong feeling of agency, of possibility in how I can function as a human being. There's a deep sense of connectedness to a power, a mystery, a support, sense of hope, of meaning, deep sense of humility, and also an expandedness that who I am and the meaning of my being is much more than simply this gross material sense perception that is a perspective that is so often reified in, let's say, Western empirical scientific culture. At the same time, neither do I want to suggest that what is perceived through sense perception is to be dismissed either. Can what is referred to as the divine be seen as manifesting through those perceptual windows too? Okay, so we'll leave it there. And perhaps I will come back and unpack this section of the prayer in more detail and explore some of the lines with more spaciousness and with more depth. But thank you for your interest in this exploration. Sending blessings and wishing you a good day.